Each nuclear fuel rod begins as rock buried underground and ends inside a reactor capable of powering entire cities. Between one point and the other, there is mining, extreme chemistry, radiological control, and an industrial precision that admits no errors. What appears to be a simple ceramic cylinder is in reality one of the most complex and monitored products on the planet. When speaking of nuclear energy, most imagine reactors, cooling towers, or large facilities protected by multiple security systems. But long before a power plant begins to generate electricity, there exists a long, costly, and technically demanding industrial chain that transforms a mineral dispersed in nature into a fuel capable of sustaining a controlled reaction for years. That journey begins with uranium, an element present in the Earth's crust in relatively low concentrations. To the naked eye, the rock containing it does not look different from many others extracted in mines around the world. However, within that material lies the foundation of one of the densest energy sources developed by humanity. The problem is that nature does not deliver this resource ready to use. It must be extracted, concentrated, purified, chemically transformed, and given a physical form suitable to withstand extreme conditions inside a reactor. The nuclear fuel manufacturing process combines mining, metallurgy, chemistry, ceramic engineering, and high-level quality control. Each stage has its own risks, its own machines, and its own protocols. Nothing is improvised. Everything is measured, monitored, and documented. In this journey, we are going to follow the complete path of nuclear fuel in 3 major stages. First, the extraction and concentration of uranium. Next, its conversion and industrial preparation. And finally, the manufacturing of the pellets, rods, and assemblies that end up in the heart of the reactor. Because before becoming electricity, nuclear energy was rock, dust, gas, and ceramic. The manufacturing of nuclear fuel begins long before the material reaches a plant. It begins in geology. Uranium does not appear in nature in the form of a rod ready to enter a reactor. It is found dispersed in the Earth's crust, mixed with rock, sediments, and minerals formed over millions of years by tectonic, hydrothermal, and sedimentary processes. Therefore, the first stretch of this chain belongs to the world of mining. Uranium deposits occur in different geological contexts. Some are near the surface and allow for open-pit mining. In those cases, large volumes of soil and rock are removed with drills, explosives, excavators, and high-capacity trucks. Other deposits are located at greater depths and require underground mining. There, galleries, ventilation systems, ground stability control, and specific procedures to protect operators from dust and prolonged exposure to natural radioactive materials come into play. There is also a third method increasingly used in certain deposits: in situ leaching. Instead of extracting the rock to process it on the surface, the deposit is drilled and chemical solutions are injected to dissolve the uranium underground. Then that pregnant solution is pumped to the surface to recover the mineral. It is a system that reduces the massive movement of rock but requires very precise hydrogeological and chemical control. Whatever the chosen method, the initial objective is always the same. The industry seeks to obtain material with uranium content, although at this stage it is still a low concentration. The extracted mineral cannot be used directly as fuel. It must first go through a sequence of crushing, grinding, and chemical treatment. In the processing plant, the rock enters large-scale crushers that reduce it to smaller fragments. Then it passes through industrial mills that turn it into a fine material. This step is fundamental because a smaller grain size allows the uranium contained in the rock to be more exposed and recovered more efficiently in subsequent chemical stages. From there, concentration begins. The milled material is subjected to chemical solutions, generally acidic or alkaline, which dissolve the uranium and separate it from the rest of the rock. That pregnant solution then undergoes purification, extraction, precipitation, and drying processes. The result is a well-known intermediate product within the nuclear industry: uranium concentrate, also called yellowcake. This concentrate represents a huge leap from the original material. The uranium is no longer dispersed in tons of rock and is instead gathered in a much more concentrated form, suitable for transport and subsequent processing. Even so, it is not yet the final fuel. It is an intermediate raw material, an industrial base upon which the next stages of the cycle are built. From this point on, the handling of the material requires very careful conditions. The concentrate must be stored in special drums or containers, correctly labeled and sealed. Each batch requires traceability. The industry needs to know which deposit it comes from, what treatment it receives, and to which facility it is sent. In the nuclear field, traceability is not a bureaucratic detail, it is part of the safety and control system. Along with production, another equally important dimension appears: environmental management. The extraction and concentration of uranium generates solid waste, treatment sludge, process water, and mineral tailings that must be contained under strict conditions. It is not enough to recover the uranium. It is also necessary to control what is left behind. Therefore, facilities include containment dams, water monitoring systems, soil waterproofing, and long-term management plans. In this first stage, the manufacturing of nuclear fuel still has an appearance very different from the image the public usually imagines. Here, mining, basic chemistry, process engineering, and waste management predominate. There are no metal rods or reactor components yet. What exists is an industrial chain that transforms a rock with low uranium content into a usable concentrate. That concentrate marks the end of the extractive phase and the beginning of a much more refined stage. From here on, uranium ceases to be primarily a matter for geologists and miners and becomes a matter for chemists, engineers, and fuel cycle specialists. Once the uranium concentrate is obtained, the process enters a much more specialized phase. The logic changes. The priority is no longer to remove the mineral from the ground or concentrate it on a large scale, but to transform it into a chemically pure, stable material suitable for the demands of nuclear fuel. It is a transition from heavy mining to fine engineering. The concentrate coming from the treatment plant contains uranium in a form useful for transport, but not yet in the ideal form for manufacturing fuel. Before moving forward, it is subjected to additional refining and conversion processes. The objective is to remove remaining impurities and obtain uranium compounds with much stricter chemical characteristics. In this industry, small variations in purity can affect subsequent stages of manufacturing and in-service performance. Conversion transforms uranium into intermediate compounds that facilitate its processing within the nuclear cycle. This stage takes place in closed facilities, with equipment resistant to corrosive substances, sealed systems, and constant monitoring. Here, the cleanliness of the process becomes decisive. It is no longer just about working with tons of material, but with very precise specifications. In this phase, one of the most sensitive points of the fuel cycle clearly appears: the isotopic composition of uranium. In its natural state, uranium is composed mainly of uranium-238, while the fraction of uranium-235 is relatively low. For many power reactors, that proportion is not sufficient, so the material must go through an isotopic adjustment stage that raises the concentration of uranium-235 to levels suitable for civil use. The important thing here is to understand that this is not a simple chemical refinement. Uranium isotopes are chemically very similar. The relevant difference lies in their mass. Therefore, the industry uses highly specialized facilities with very rigorous containment and control systems. Each batch is monitored, each flow is measured, and each step is documented under national and international standards. After that stage, the material must return to a stable, solid form, suitable for fuel manufacturing. At this point, uranium dioxide takes center stage, one of the most important compounds in the entire nuclear cycle. This material is used because it presents good chemical stability, high thermal resistance, and a very favorable behavior inside the reactor when manufactured as a ceramic material. However, producing uranium dioxide is not enough on its own. The powder obtained must meet very precise conditions. Chemical purity must be high, particle size must be kept within defined ranges. Grain size distribution influences subsequent pressing and sintering. If the material is not uniform, the final stage of manufacturing can be compromised. Therefore, uranium dioxide goes through laboratory controls, chemical tests, and physical verifications. Its composition, behavior, and suitability to become fuel pellets are analyzed. In this instance, the nuclear industry shows one of its most distinctive traits. It works with very small margins. A process that begins in giant mines and equipment ends up depending on microscopic tolerances. Radiological protection and contamination control also occupy a central place. Although the material has not yet been irradiated inside a reactor, it remains a product that requires special procedures. Fine powder must be handled in controlled environments to avoid dispersion, cross-contamination, and unnecessary exposure. Operational cleanliness and process discipline are constants. At the same time, documentation accompanies every transformation. The nuclear sector does not only manufacture materials, it also manufactures technical history. Each batch is associated with analysis records, process conditions, and quality control results. That traceability allows for the reconstruction of the material's complete journey from its origin to its final form. This stage represents a clear frontier. Behind remains uranium as a mineral resource. Ahead appears uranium as an engineering material. Once the uranium dioxide reaches the required quality, it is ready to enter the physical manufacturing phase, where a dark and fine powder begins to acquire the exact shape with which it will function inside a reactor. The last stage of manufacturing converts the processed material into a product ready to be loaded into a reactor. Here, uranium ceases to be presented as powder or an intermediate compound and becomes a high-precision physical system. It is the stretch where chemistry joins with ceramic engineering, metallurgy, and dimensional control. Everything begins with uranium dioxide powder. That material enters the manufacturing line to be compacted into small cylindrical pieces known as fuel pellets. Although they are small in size, they concentrate an enormous energy density. Each one represents a functional unit of fuel within the rod. The first step is pressing. The powder is introduced into dies that give it shape and compact it. This operation must be uniform. The initial density of each pellet needs to be kept within strict parameters because any variation can generate defects in subsequent stages. Uneven compaction can translate into inadequate porosity, cracks, or deformations during heat treatment. After pressing, the pellets pass into sintering furnaces. There, they are subjected to high temperatures under controlled atmospheres. During this process, the ceramic material densifies. The particles bond, the structure gains strength, and the piece acquires the solidity necessary to withstand the extreme environment of the reactor. Upon leaving the furnace, the pellet is no longer a simple compressed piece. It is a high-density ceramic component designed to work for long periods under severe conditions. After sintering, many pellets require a dimensional finishing stage. They are calibrated, ground, or inspected with measuring equipment to ensure that their dimensions remain within very small tolerances. Inside a fuel rod, geometry matters a lot. It influences thermal transfer, mechanical behavior, and the stability of the assembly. The approved pellets move toward a decisive stage, their insertion into long, thin metal tubes. These tubes function as fuel cladding. Their task is to contain the ceramic material and isolate it from the reactor environment. To this end, special alloys are used, usually selected for their mechanical resistance, their behavior against corrosion, and their low neutron absorption. It is not a casual choice. The cladding must protect the fuel without interfering too much with the controlled nuclear reaction. The loading of the pellets into those tubes is carried out under very careful conditions. The ceramic column must remain correctly distributed and aligned. In some designs, auxiliary internal components are incorporated to help maintain mechanical stability during operation. Once the loading is completed, the ends of the tube are sealed using high-precision welds. Hermeticity is essential. A fuel rod needs to preserve structural integrity and containment throughout its entire cycle of use. When the tube is sealed, it becomes a fuel rod. But the final product for a nuclear power plant is not an isolated rod. The operation of the reactor requires complete assemblies composed of tens or even hundreds of rods organized within a common structure. This structure maintains the proper separation between rods, facilitates the passage of the coolant, and ensures geometric stability within the core. The manufacturing of assemblies requires very high mechanical precision. The rods must be correctly aligned, fixed in specific supports, and comply with exact global dimensions. Each reactor model uses its own design, so the assembly must respond to the needs of the system where it will operate. Before leaving the plant, the fuel goes through a battery of final controls. The hermeticity of the rods, the quality of the welds, the dimensions of the assembly, surface cleanliness, and the complete documentation of the batch are verified. Each component is registered. Each rod can be traced back to the material it comes from. This traceability is one of the pillars of the nuclear sector. Then comes the transport. The finished assemblies are placed in containers specially designed to protect the material during transit. From there, they travel to the nuclear power plants, where they are stored under controlled conditions until the moment of loading into the reactor. The most impressive thing about this stage is the distance that exists between the simple appearance of the product and the complexity of its manufacturing. A pellet looks like a small ceramic piece. A rod looks like a thin metal tube. But behind each one, there is mining, advanced chemistry, thermal processes, precision metallurgy, quality control, and strict regulations. The electricity produced later at the plant depends on each of those stages functioning with exactness. That is the core of the entire story. Nuclear fuel is not born in the reactor. It is born much earlier, underground, and goes through a long chain of transformation until it becomes a precise, stable, and extraordinarily powerful structure prepared to sustain a controlled reaction and generate energy for years.